shortly about whether district elections will be mandated here in Santa Monica. We'll have a couple quick reports on the 2 block parties we held last month. Maria wants to present on what's being called a Santa Monica Clean and Safe initiative. Our next meeting will be second Wednesday, so it's August 9th at Virginia Park. So that'll be our first actual in-person. We're trying to figure out how to make it truly hybrid, where we can have people in person and then others can join on Zoom. And yeah, that would be the best of both worlds. So that's Chris saying hello, Jessica.
Hi, Chris.
He just has these images of offices and libraries. Okay. Let me send out a text. This is something I forgot to finish. I want to get a text group of all the board members. We'll remind everybody that we're on here. Call Maria. Let's see what's. So thank you for your patience. We'll get moving here in a few minutes.
Oh, okay. Hello.
Hi.
Hey, Maria, would you mind sending out a text to the other board members?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll do that right now.
On yet?
Yeah.
That reminded me, I wanted to create a group, but I don't think I have everyone's phone number yet. Tony, you sent me yours, right? And then I think Jessica, you did too.
Yes.
I did as well, yes.
All right.
And Maria, this is Elias from the Santa Monica Office of Sustainability. He's going to be giving us a
Hi, how are you?
Good to meet you, Maria.
Good to meet you too. Let me send this out. All right, sent that out. Let's see.
This is what I want to get on.
Were you able to get in touch with Kevin, Maria?
Yeah, so he's going to join us at about 10:15.
Okay.
Yeah.
20%, right?
Here comes Mary.
Okay, great.
What should it be?
Barbara. All right, 2 more people are filing in.
Hi, Mary.
Hi, how are you? How's everyone?
Hi.
Hey, Mary. Hey, Barbara.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you, Maria, for sending me the link.
Yes. Sorry, I didn't send that earlier.
Oh, that's okay. My email is full. I can't receive any more emails
I know,
because I have no more storage.
I just remembered that, you know.
my email. Yes, I know, because I don't have any storage left.
Do you have an alternate email address, Mary?
No, I think I'll work on that.
Okay.
I'll work
Yeah,
on it,
just
and
send
I'll
it
let
to
you
us
know.
when you have it. Yeah.
Okay.
It's the Mary
Thank
Gold
you.
that keeps bouncing back.
Yeah, no, and no longer works right now. Okay. Thank you.
Awesome.
Okay.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and just pop up for those of you who just joined the meeting. Here's our agenda, and I'll pass the baton to Elias here. He's going to be presenting, making a presentation about a community resilience center at Virginia Park. We'll learn what that initiative's all about, or that proposal. And then Kevin Shankman's supposed to be joining us with a brief update on the voting rights case that was heard by the California Supreme Court, a couple weeks ago, I think. Barbara, if you don't mind, you and I can just give quick reports on the block parties we held last month.
Okay.
We're successful, but we'll get into the details. And then Maria is going to talk to us about the Santa Monica Clean and Safe initiative, and which is a really interesting proposal. And then any new business we'll come back to at the end. Next meeting will be August 9th. So without further ado, Elias, I will turn the meeting over to you, and go for 15 minutes or so. We'll have a little time for questions, but
Sure.
maybe introduce yourself, since I don't know all the details.
Yeah, great to be here. I've never actually attended a Pico Neighborhood Association meeting. I'm sorry couldn't be there in person, but hopefully I'm back when we are at Virginia Avenue Park one of these days. So I'm Elias Platt-Bermeo. I am in the city's Office of Sustainability and the Environment in the Department of Public Works. And I'm focused on climate and energy related projects for the city. So excited to be here to talk about something that is just starting to get underway. The concept for it is something that we have a lot of approval for and excitement around, and that is the possibility of creating a community resilience center at and around Virginia Avenue Park. And I'll get into exactly what we mean by that in a second. So let me see if I can share my screen. Are you all seeing that?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you, Barbara.
Yes.
So just a little bit of context to sort of situate the project that we're going to be speaking about today. Like I mentioned, I'm in the city's Office of Sustainability and the Environment. And what my team specifically does is essentially do the work to make sure that the city as a whole is having the smallest and least consequential impact on the environment and our climate as possible. So some of you may have heard reference of the city's Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. I'll describe that a little bit more in depth, but that's one of the main guiding documents that the city has. It was developed over a number of years and launched in 2019 to essentially dictate how the city plans to achieve some really aggressive goals around sustainability and mitigating climate change. And so, like that plan indicates by its title, there's two sort of elements of sustainability work that my team in my office works on. One is climate action, which there's a slide up on the screen that shows a little bit about what we mean by that. It's essentially all of the work that's being done to mitigate our impact on a changing climate. So reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and make sure that the level of global warming or climate change that we see is as minimal as possible, and that Santa Monica's footprint is as minimal as possible. So climate action is one half of it. There's a couple different sectors that we talk about when we're talking about climate action. Again, that's all the things to mitigate our impact. And then the second half of what my team works on and what's outlined in the Climate Action Adaptation Plan is that adaptation component. So, unfortunately, humankind has already done some amount of damage to the environment and locked ourselves into some degree of a changing climate. There's certainly still a lot of room to dictate to what extent the climate will change as a result of greenhouse gas emissions and the activities of humankind. But the reality is that we will need to some degree, evolve and adapt to that changing climate. So there's 4 different categories of how the city is planning to adapt to that changing climate. What's up on the screen right now. So climate ready community. How do we ensure that our community is ready and safe when disaster events happen as a result of climate change? How do we make sure that we're self-sufficient in terms of the water that we're using? So we're not reliant on, importing water from hundreds or thousands of miles away, but we can be sort of self-sustaining in terms of how do we prepare for coastal erosion and the impacts of a rising sea level. So obviously Santa Monica is on the coast. That's an issue that we'll certainly need to tackle head on. And then how do we make sure that our food systems are resilient and we don't have folks going hungry. So specifically, I want to talk a little bit more about this climate ready community, because that's what we're really focusing in on when we're talking about this Virginia Avenue Park project that's just starting to get underway. And so climate ready community, essentially what we mean by that, like I said, is making sure that, to the extent that there is a changing climate here in Santa Monica, our community is ready and prepared for that, so that, no one is made worse off by that. And we especially want to be aware of the fact that climate change doesn't necessarily impact all people and all communities equally. So higher resourced areas and higher income people or families are generally more able to, on their own, be resilient to the impacts of climate change. So as a city, there's a lot that we can and need to do to make sure that everyone across Santa Monica who lives or works in or plays in Santa Monica is resilient to those impacts of climate change. And it also means increasing the resilience of all the city's infrastructure. So, increased heat can have stresses on infrastructure and communities. Rising sea levels obviously can have impacts on our infrastructure and our communities. How do we do sort of both of those things of bolstering the strength of our infrastructure, and then on the other side, bolstering the strength and resilience of our community? So one element of that, and it's actually called out down here on the left, you can see some of the specific call outs in the Climate Action Adaptation Plan about how to achieve a climate ready community, is developing some of these community resilience centers or neighborhood resilience hubs. There's a couple different terms for it, but how do we develop spaces or campuses or sites where we can augment, facilities that already exist so that they serve a lot of purposes during those sorts of disaster events that may be more frequent as a result of climate change, and then support the community year round in being a more cohesive and strong and resilient Santa Monica population. So when we're talking about community resilience centers or community resilience hubs, those terms are kind of interchangeable. It sounds fancy, but really it's just a simple way of saying, it's a facility or a building or a site that has been augmented to essentially provide specific support to the community, both during one of those disaster events, after that disaster event, so that we can get back to business as usual in a safe and efficient way, and then provide year-round services to that community. So parks in Santa Monica, especially Virginia Avenue Park, already provides so much to the community. Our thinking around developing community resilience centers across the city, and specifically at Virginia Avenue Park, is to build on all the work that's already being done there and the services being offered there by making that facility and that entire park space more resilient to some of the impacts of climate change, like extreme heat that can lead to power outages like we've seen in recent years across California. So there's a lot of benefits to developing these community resilient centers. On the sort of people and community focused side of things, they serve as spaces where people can congregate, share information, build local community power and leadership, and then have access to some of those services like health promoting services or community empowerment services like Virginia Avenue Park already provides to a good degree. And then the last one down here is, already very close to my team's heart, which is reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So one element of these resilient centers that we're trying to develop, and a really crucial part of this, is that we're trying to add resilient energy infrastructure to Virginia Avenue Park and any other sites that become sort of a resilient center, so that if there is, a heat wave that sweeps Southern California and causes a regional power outage, that we have basically a site at Virginia Avenue Park that can run on its own power through solar energy and through battery storage to keep that solar energy and make sure that we can run those facilities for some number of hours or days in the event that there is a power outage that affects our region. And so specifically going from sort of the broad to the specific at Virginia Avenue Park, our thought is that this is, from conversations we've had with the community and with our colleagues who work in and around the park, it'd be the perfect site to do sort of our first City of Santa Monica Community Resilience Center. And what that would really look like is not so much structural changes or infrastructure changes. All it would really mean is building on the solar capacity that already exists at the Pico Library. There's a solar array up there that provides a good chunk of the energy for the library, but expanding on that, building more rooftop solar or carport solar, like you may have seen. I think I got a photo in here of it, that provides sort of shade for parking structures or shade canopies in other areas of the park, so that we can essentially generate our own power, and then installing battery storage systems so that we can store that power and use it in the event that there is a power outage in our region that impacts Santa Monica. And then on the community resilience side of thing, it means building on all the great work that's already being done at Virginia Avenue Park. From what I've seen and what I've learned in the past year or so, it's already such an important community serving facility. The library, the Thelma building, all the different components of the park that are year round or at specific times of the year. It's just, from what I understand, a really well utilized space that has a lot of potential to be sort of this community hub. So some of the things that other cities have used their community resilience centers for in the event of emergencies. So think if there is, an earthquake or a blackout or something like that, these hubs can serve as community gathering points where city officials or local community leaders can share information and know that they'll have power and access to restrooms and all those sorts of things. They could also serve as a food distribution center in the event that we need to be caring for our community in that way. We could have communication capacities because they are running on their own stored electricity. And then in Southern California specifically, something that we see a lot as a result of one of the impacts of climate change that we're really feeling is heat waves. So could we use this center as a community cooling center for anyone in the region who doesn't have access to air conditioning or is unhoused, any of those sorts of things? And then, as we've seen in some other cities, and we've actually experienced in Santa Monica, some of these sites can be used for health serving purposes. So community vaccination clinics or health clinics, things like that. And then year-round uses that we've seen in other cities are honestly a lot of the things that Virginia Avenue Park is already doing. So employment services, professional development, serving as a food pantry year-round for any residents who need access to that sort of thing. And then, other types of education around health or employment, which it sounds like Virginia Avenue Park already serves in a lot of ways. And so zooming out for a second, we've looked at, a number of different sites to serve as sort of the first foray into developing one of these community resilience centers, but Virginia Avenue Park seems to check all of the boxes. It's already, like I said, that hub for a lot of those types of community serving programs. The Pico neighborhood, as I'm sure you're all aware, is one of the most culturally diverse neighborhoods and economically diverse neighborhoods in the city. There are some new projects underway, like the commercial kitchen going in at Virginia Avenue Park. And we've actually had developed a couple years ago a master plan for the city as to how we want to increase community resilience. And Virginia Avenue Park, even back then, was identified as one that serves a lot of purposes already and would be a really good community serving resilience hub. So what could it look like? Here's a photo of just some carport solar shading structures. It wouldn't look all that different than what Virginia Avenue Park looks like right now. It would really just be augmenting solar on the rooftops, perhaps shading of the car structures so that we could generate our own clean electricity, and then figuring out what services and resources we want to offer through that community resilience center, which is what I really want to dig into a little bit more with you all is what you want to see out of a center like this. Because, we've got some ideas, but truly, if we're doing this work right, it's about co-designing it with groups like yours, the Virginia Avenue Park Advisory Board, all the other community groups that use that space. So live in or work in or play in that community. And so rough timeline for how we're thinking about rolling out this project. We're really right at the beginning stages of this right now. So beginning these sorts of conversations with groups like yours. Later this year, we're going to be applying for funding to essentially develop this project and put up that solar and install those batteries and support those other services that might get developed. And then hopefully by the end of this year and into next year, we'll have funding secured so that we can begin construction of that project, which again, I don't think is going to be disruptive at all. It should only take a few months to install solar on the roofs and install some battery storage. TBD on what exactly that'll look like. That'll all be fleshed out in 2024. But we're really using this year and next to help or to hopefully design the uses of this space with groups like yours and groups that will be using it at the end of the day, with the ultimate goal of hopefully in around 2025 having this sort of resilience center fully up and running and able to remain on and powered and functional in the event of any sort of disaster event. And then onward from that, it's just about figuring out if we want to expand on that. So we're treating this as sort of the first pilot isn't necessarily the right word because it's a concept that's been proven out, but the first of its kind in Santa Monica Community Resilience Center. But we've seen in other cities that this works really well. And if it's designed right with the input of folks who are going to be using it, it's a really good model to help the community earn more funding down the road to do similar sorts of things. So if we got a little bit of time for discussion or questions, my main question of you all is, and we can continue this conversation down the road in future meetings for sure, but to just start thinking about what all you would want to see from a community resilience center like this. What services would you want to see offered? How would you want to see it being utilized in the event of emergencies, but also year round? And then who else should we be talking to? We know there's some other groups who are key stakeholders in the Pico neighborhood and in and around Virginia Avenue Park, but there's probably folks that we're missing. So while we're in the early stages of this, who should we be adding to our list? And I see a hand from Chris, and we can just open it up beyond that.
Great, thank you, Elias. Chris.
Yeah, so the bulk of any additional solar will be rooftop solar, so it really shouldn't have any impact on how folks use the space. We're still determining what amount of solar energy production will be required because, to some degree, it depends on how we want to use the space, right? Like if we want it to be a community cooling center and be able to be powered for 3 days straight, that means we need more energy than, if we weren't doing something like that. So we don't know yet, but what I can say is the impact on the usable park space would be really, really minimal. It would just be installing some batteries, probably adjacent to a building, and we make sure that that's not in a place that it impacts how the park is used. Utilizing existing buildings and seeing how we can augment them to provide different services. But yeah, there wouldn't be new construction of any sort of building at Virginia Avenue Park.
Well, except maybe in the image you showed of the parking lot, there would be a kind of roof built over the existing parking area.
Exactly, yeah. So again, not necessarily in the usable space, not where people are already doing recreation or anything like that, but possibly the construction of some car shading solar.
I would just suggest, and maybe you've already done this, a similar presentation with the Friends of Sunset Park, which they're right on the border of Virginia Park, the neighboring neighborhood association, adjacent to us in Pico.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, it's not just people in Pico neighborhood who use Virginia Park a lot. It's especially Sunset Park residents as well. Okay, any other questions for Elias?
I do. I
Yeah,
have a question.
Maria.
And I think Jessica has a question as
Okay.
well. All right, so so just so I understand, Elias, first of all, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us this information. We really appreciate that. So just to be clear, are you proposing then to kind of take over Virginia Avenue Park and convert that into the Community Resilience Center? Is that what you're proposing?
Yeah, really good question. I should have been more clear about that. It wouldn't be a takeover of any means. Virginia Avenue Park would still do all the things that it does today. What we're just trying to figure out is what more could it do if we had some funding to provide additional services through the park, or infrastructure to make sure that that park could be more useful to the community in the event that there's an emergency situation like there was during COVID, and like there could be if there's an earthquake or a
So
heat event or something like that.
Right. So we currently have a a park director. So what role would there be a director of the Community Resilience Program or Center? And then how does that work?
Yeah, so we're in talks with all of the different city teams that work in and around the park. So the Human Services Division, I don't know if you all know Carla and their team, but they're all looped into this, and we're still figuring out what the sort of structure of management would be for any of
Right.
this, because we haven't defined how exactly it'd be used, but it likely would be managed by folks who are already working in and around the park. So not a new structure.
Right. And you mentioned in your presentation that you guys put together a master plan for community resilience last year. Who
Yeah.
who was part of that group that created this master plan for the city? And I'm assuming for our community too, you created a master plan for our community?
So it was I should clarify, it was a resilient energy master plan. So essentially figuring out how we could make sure that critical city facilities can run in the event that there's a power outage. And that was created by our Office of Emergency Management. So
Oh, got it. All right.
yeah.
Awesome. The other question is, I know that you're proposing to put battery charging stations for cars. Are you proposing to increase that amount?
Yeah, it's possible. So our team is working to increase the number of EV chargers separate from even this initiative at Virginia Avenue Park. But through this initiative, it's possible that we could get some funding to make that number go up even more.
And then when you talked about battery storage, what kinds of batteries are you referring to?
Yeah, so these would be large, basically like industrial scale batteries that power large buildings. So bigger than a car battery or things like that. But we need to figure out the exact size that would be needed to make sure that it can power the
Right.
building for as long as we need.
Okay, and in your resilience, your community resilience, are you taking into account environmental justice?
Yeah, so I mean that's a big part of why we think Virginia Avenue Park is a good place for this, because it's one of the communities in Santa Monica that is prone to environmental injustices more than others. But if there's more things that we should be considering or other places that we should be looking into, that's a topic that we want to be really, really mindful of as we're doing this work.
Well, so I think it's important, Elias, that you know that the Pico neighborhood has the largest concentration of cell towers in the city of Santa Monica. And that's problematic to us because some of these cell towers are right in front of elementary schools. The other thing, so there's a concern in terms of the impact of cell towers on the health and well-being of residents. And you're talking about increasing charging stations. Have you looked at the impact of charging stations have on human beings? Like if there's an increase in some sort of radiation, or even the increase, you're talking about putting industrial sized batteries in a park that's in a community that's already dealing with radiation impact with all these cell towers. I think that there's a bit of a disconnection there. I think that you all are approaching it in a good way. I'm just saying, because you're trying to you're trying to think forward and what the community can need. So I get that. I think if that's what you're going to do, then this would be better served right by the airport, because that's where you have a runway. In case there's some sort of emergency, then you deal with it there. You're putting industrial size batteries in a neighborhood that's been impacted by environmental racism, in a neighborhood that has been concentrated with the placements of waste facilities. Our neighborhood was zoned industrial, not because it made sense in terms of the land, but because there was a majority concentration of Latino and Black residents. So I just think this whole battery storage and increasing charging stations is concerning.
Maria, I think those are really fair points, and it's something that we should be mindful of as we're figuring out if and how to do any projects like this. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
And we've had 3 hands up for a while. First was Jessica, then Barbara, then Kevin. So Jessica.
Yeah, I mean, I echo some of the concerns that Maria has, and I think just providing more education on some of the known impacts of the more charging stations and some of the other things that you mentioned would be helpful. But I had a different question as well. I know that the city manager had mentioned setting up some of the parks to possibly test out like a incubator for like the kitchen business for different businesses like involving the kitchen. Is that been part of the conversations that you've had, and how that would change the funding or what's needed, or whether that would still be possible if now you're adding perhaps more equipment or whatever needs to be added for this incubator that's been talked about?
Yeah, great question. So that incubator is still in play from what I understand. It's not being led by my team, but it's that community kitchen, and it's an all-electric community kitchen at Virginia Avenue Park. I'm not sure when that's slated to be finished, or construction on that slated to be finished, but that wouldn't impact how we, in a negative way, it wouldn't impact how we were to move forward or to not move forward on this project. If anything, what a solar system and a battery storage system would do is make sure that kitchen and incubator can run in the event that there's a power outage in our region. So if anything, it's helpful for our case if we're looking for funding for a project like this at Virginia Avenue Park, to say that there is this community serving all electric kitchen that is serving a number of purposes at Virginia Avenue Park for the communities that are possibly going to be working and cooking out of there.
Okay, Barbara.
Yeah, I'm actually very happy to hear about this potential center at Virginia Park, because I mean, I think the best thing would be if more tenants in the Pico neighborhood had air conditioning, but because it's so hard to to make that happen, I don't know what would have to take place for more tenants to have air conditioning. I think it would be great to have a place for people to go to, especially during heat waves, during wildfires, earthquakes. You never know. And the thing is that battery storage and solar energy, that's a different kind of energy from cell towers. They're not at all the same. And when you build solar panels, I have solar panels on my place and a Tesla battery. And, they are built in such a way that all the electric magnetic fields are grounded to the earth. So they are not a hazard to health. They are grounded, and which means that the earth is taking up any of those fields that are created. Also, you can actually ground your body too if you're really concerned, and it's something I do regularly. The minute you touch the earth with your bare skin, you are not affected by all the unseen electric magnetic fields that we're subject to because of all our electrical appliances and our electric wiring in the house. So earthing your body is great, but these batteries and solar systems will be earthed, will be grounded. They are not at all like cell towers. That's a different frequency. So I wouldn't be afraid of that. I mean, I think it's really wonderful because I don't think we can get air conditioning for all those tenants in the Pico neighborhood, you know, which would help them so much. But how do we get that done? I really don't know. I mean, that's expensive. And maybe we can work with Community Corp to maybe do their buildings or require them. I mean, I think they're going for solar, which is so helpful to pay for air conditioning. So definitely, if you want air conditioning for your own place, solar is a great place to start because that will give you the energy you need during the hottest part of the day to run that air conditioning. So I'm very happy to hear about this plan to turn Virginia Park into a place where people can go if the worst things happen. And we just don't know what we're going to have happen in the next few years. You know, things are getting bad. I mean, what if the Santa Monica Mountains, you know, start burning like crazy and then the fires come across the freeway? I mean, it's all possible. An earthquake is possible. We'll need more than just Virginia Park as a center. I mean, I'm hoping that these centers will be placed around the city because there are other people in the city, not just the Pico neighborhood, without air conditioning. And you never know where the next hazard will strike, you know, an earthquake or a forest fire or even a neighborhood fire. If the winds get bad enough, then our suburbs will burn also, not just the mountains. So, I mean, I think it's wonderful to be prepared like this. So I'm happy to hear that this is in the works for Virginia Park. And I'm wondering if you've looked at other places in the city. I mean, I think you're right, the Pico neighborhood probably needs it more than other neighborhoods because there are so many people that cannot turn on their air conditioning and be comfortable. So do you have other locations in mind?
Yeah, we're still in the early stages of that, and Barbara, I appreciate all of those comments a great deal. We're looking at what could be sort of the phase 2 of this, and what's already sort of a natural community gathering spot. So, I mean, nothing is locked yet, but folks have thrown out City Hall and sort of the campus here because it's central and well known. Other park spaces may be an option, but that's sort of an ongoing conversation.
Yeah, I mean, do you know of any programs that are being considered to get more air conditioning into individual apartments?
Air conditioning specifically, I'm not actually aware of. Community Core may be, like you mentioned, a good contact there to see what sorts of work they've done. The city has tried to do a lot of work to get folks, especially low-income folks, more access to more efficient and electric appliances instead of gas-burning appliances because of the health impacts. But air
Yes.
conditioning is something that's also clearly a need based on what we all see around us, which is a warming Santa Monica and region.
Yeah, air conditioning and insulation. I mean, I got so much comfort from insulating my attic and then having air conditioning. I lived without it for 30 years here in Santa Monica, but I can't do without it now. So it's great to have, but if you don't have it, then a cooling center would be wonderful.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. Kevin.
Hey, so I'll be brief, but I want to try to put a finer point on Maria's remarks and take it out of the realm of cell towers and, you know, all of that, because that's a whole different debate. But Elias, you know what? I'm probably mispronouncing your name. Is it Elias?
Elias, there you go.
Elias. Okay. So Elias, you know, you look far too young to be involved in any of the prior decisions of the city, but the city has a particularly poor track record when it comes to citing undesirable elements in the Pico neighborhood, right? That benefit the entire city, but, you know, are a burden where they're cited. So for example, the freeway, the maintenance yard, the trash sorting facility, the hazardous waste storage facility, the train maintenance yard, I could go on and on. And I think there is a general concern that, you know, whenever the city is talking about citing something for the benefit of the city entirely, that the burden will be placed on the Pico neighborhood and the benefit will be spread to the city more generally. And I heard some things in your presentation that would kind of suggest that maybe the plan is to have more of the benefits inure to the Pico neighborhood, but then some of the other things not so much. So I guess I'd like you to address that a little bit to the extent that you can in the context of environmental justice and all of that.
Yeah, Kevin, that's a really good point, and it is important to acknowledge the history of that and the impact that that has had and continues to have. What I would say is that if we were ever to move forward with a project like this, there'd be many more conversations with folks in and around Virginia Avenue Park and in the Pico neighborhood and adjacent neighborhoods about whether the pros outweigh the cons. So, I mean, this is the beginning of the conversation, and like I said, if we were to, do something like this and install solar on the roofs and small battery storage anywhere in Virginia Avenue Park, the stated motive and absolute motive of the city is to have that be as minimally invasive and disruptive as possible so that there is, a net positive brought by that because of the benefits that it could bring and ensuring that we've got a safe place to feed our community, to share information with our community, and any other things the center could do. But I mean, I really appreciate you bringing that up because it's important for folks in the city to keep hearing that and take that to heart.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. I think all of us